Welcome back, everybody, to another episode of the Junkyard Dawgcast. I'm your host, Jordan Hill. Got Kip Adams with me this week. The countdown is on. We're just a few days away now at this point from G-Day, but that doesn't mean there's not a lot going on before then. Some news going on as we record this on Tuesday, just a little after 12. Kip, how is this Tuesday treating you as we continue counting down till we're back in Sanford Stadium again?
Yeah, I thought it was just going to be a nice, relaxing, calm before the storm, but pretty explosive day in the news world. A lot going on. So, ready to talk about it. No shortage of storylines here as we get ready for G-Day. So, hey, sometimes we have to come in here and, try to manufacture some discussion, even though, all of you guys are really passionate about Georgia sports. There's never a lack of interest in Georgia sports, but sometimes in the off season you got to kind of figure out some things to talk about. But today is not one of those days. A lot going on, and I'm ready to break it down, Jordan.
No doubt. Yeah, we're not quite in the June, July, Mount Rushmore of, that's sort of the sports radio gimmick. We're not there. We luckily have a lot to talk about. We'll get in to the big news of Tuesday with Georgia picking up another commitment, this in the 2024 class. Now, Nitro Tuggle, a wide receiver out of Indiana, a 3-star, 6'3", 190 pounds. He commits to what was already the number one class in the nation for Georgia, and they continue to sharpen it. What, Kip, can you tell us about Nitro, what you know, what you've seen from him, and what Georgia could be getting landing a guy of this talent?
Well, you just looked at last year's cycle with Yazid Haynes, just a guy that came in and not a lot of people knew about him. Georgia lands that commitment, and we just spent the last couple of months talking about how Georgia feels, they got a steal. And with Brian McClendon on board, they need to get help at the wide receiver position in this cycle. And it's a big position need for him. Got to load up in that room. And already had a commitment from Nye Carr, a top 10 wide receiver in the country. And now, Nitro Tuggle, he lands a guy that's 6'3", 190 pounds. It's hard not to see some A.D. Mitchell in there because you look at his highlights, and every other time he touched the ball, he scored a touchdown. And so I think you look at the fact that he had 22 touchdowns on 38 catches, and then had 2 rushing touchdowns, a couple passing touchdowns, and had a couple return touchdowns in there for good measure as well. The competition level there in Indiana, I'm not going to sit here and pretend that it was the most elite talent he was going up against on a weekly basis. But at the same time, we're going to learn a lot more about what he brings to the table over the next couple of months, not just in the camp circuit, but also the fact that he plans on transferring to IMG Academy for his senior season. So, he will ramp up that competition level, and, that's good for his development as well. Because obviously on film, you see that, he was just kind of a man amongst boys out there. But you look at the frame, you look at the body control, his ability to change direction at that size. He's got ball skills. That catch radius is something that Georgia places a high value on as well. And I think, he makes guys miss for a taller wide receiver. It's a rare skill set. So I think that he was a guy that was moving up a lot of schools' boards. I know multiple schools really had him as, one of the top guys at the wide receiver position. And if Brian McClendon's taking his commitment right now with the guys that Georgia is in on at wide receiver, it tells you where he is on Georgia's board as well. I know he got the offer from Georgia late February. He visited, I believe, at the beginning of the month, around April 1st, and he'd already planned on taking an official visit back to Georgia in June. Now he's going to do so as a commitment. So I think, again, like I said, if Georgia's going to take 3 or 4 wideouts in this class, him being that second guy tells you a lot about where he is on Georgia's board, just how highly they think about him.
Yeah, you look at the work that Brian McClendon has put in recruiting receivers since he came back for his second stint, and it seems like another talented guy that, just looking at his recruiting ranking, it made me think back to last year with Zede Haynes, that it kind of seemed like after he committed to Georgia, all of a sudden people really started paying attention. And you would think that There will be a lot of eyes on him going to IMG Academy, and Georgia's gotten some good players from IMG. And you look at this last class with Samuel Mpemba and Gabriel Harris, a few edge rushers. The other piece of news going to the mascot side of things on Tuesday, we're going to have a new Ugga this year. They announced that Boom, a 10-month-old English Bulldog, will be crowned, I guess would be the term you would use, on Saturday before D-Day. He'll replace Q, who has been Ugga since 2015, Ugga 10. It's one of those things with these Bulldogs. You never really know, honestly, how long they're going to be around. But Q, I think, is the most winningest Bulldog, most winningest Ugga in the mascot history. And, we knew there were going to be some new beginnings on Saturday with G-Day just because of some of the roster turnover, some of the new faces we'll see. But Kip will be greeted to get to see a new live mascot when we get there on Saturday.
Yeah, how exciting! As if they needed any help to sell tickets for G-Day. Now you get to see, the new mascot with a name that only Kirby and Muschamp could love. I think we've, between Muschamp's nickname, and Kirby giving out a couple booms on the sideline himself. I think you can kind of see where the inspiration is for this Georgia mascot name, and also, like you said, I mean, Q you're retiring with a couple national championships to his name. I think a well-deserved vacation for him, and I think you could celebrate his era as one of, if not the most successful runs in program history. And congratulations to him. But I think the fact that Boom looks like a younger dog based on the photo presented by Georgia, I think that they are preparing for a potentially long, maybe even more successful run. The bar has been set. So if you're going to top Q, you're really going to have a historic run for Georgia. But I think Kirby Smart's kind of set this program up to do just that. So you can't help but be excited for Boom, but I also know the pressure is on. So good luck out there, Boom, and looking forward to seeing you between the hedges this weekend.
Yeah, shout out to Q, who was a part of a lot of wins. Barely avoided Bevo that time at the Sugar Bowl. I mean, they might have needed another Bulldog a lot sooner had he not been able to get out of the way. But I would encourage anyone who's going to be at the game on Saturday. I think they're shooting for 3:50 to be the time that they will, put the new collar and the passing of the torch, as I guess you'd say. Young Pup's got some big shoes to fill, but will be exciting to see him on the sidelines. Kip, since we last recorded, there was another commitment besides the wide receiver Nitro that we talked about a few minutes ago. It actually happened on Saturday while we were waiting to talk to Kirby Smart after a Saturday practice and a few days after Georgia's second scrimmage. Elias Williams, a 4-star, I should say, tight end prospect, commits to Georgia. Looks the part, and looks like the latest in a long line of talented tight ends that have come into the room. What do you make of what Williams will be? He's a member of the 2025 class, very talented in-state player. What do you know about him, and what you think he will bring to the table by the time he comes to Athens?
Well, right as of right now, I'm going to say Todd Hartley does it again. Landing another just elite athlete, a guy that on the basketball court is I think like a 20-13 guy, a guy that has been one of the best basketball players in the state of Georgia for the last 2 years. And you look at that frame, 6'7", 235 pounds, and it's hard not to see a young Darnell Washington right there, just because, again, there aren't many out there that, we talk about Darnell and we're saying there won't be another one. And yet here's Todd Hartley landing another 6'7" guy in his sophomore season who's, already got elite size for his position. But he's just a special athlete. And I don't think that, Todd Hartley's biggest battle might not be keeping him. It might be keeping him in his position room, because when you have that kind of size, you can project to multiple positions at the next level. And so for Georgia, you get him on campus and you figure that out later, because you look at what he's also able to do on the defensive side of the ball. He could be an edge rusher. Who knows how big he might get over the next couple of years if he comes in at 6'7", 275 pounds. He could be lining up at defensive tackle, defensive end for Georgia as well. There's a lot of development ahead of him because he plays AAU basketball. He has yet to completely focus on football, but you could tell that the body control is there. He does a great job just changing direction for his size. That catch radius, as I said before, with the other commitment Georgia just landed, that provides you a mismatch and a great help for a quarterback who may have some off-target throws. He can correct those. And so I think for Georgia, you're just betting on that upside. And why wouldn't you? 24/7 Sports had him ranked as the number 3 edge rusher in the country. He's now projected to play tight end for Georgia. But again, like I said, that you worry about that later. He could play multiple roles for Georgia. He could end up being in that same Darnell Washington role. I think that you just know that he has multiple years ahead of him. And you have to be excited about that because he looks like an elite receiver and one of the best athletes in the country already as a sophomore.
Take a quick break, come back, talk about what Kirby Smart had to say during the Saturday session we had with him, and then talk a little bit about what we expect to see at G-Day. Welcome back, everybody. Well, yeah, we had a chance to talk to Kirby, which proved to be the last time we will talk to him until G-Day is in the books. Some really interesting notes. I thought he was pretty willing to share information, which that was a nice a change of pace. Just talking about some of the different players. He talked up Lawson Lucky, who I really think we may have heard more about than perhaps any other Bulldog this spring with what he's been able to do. I asked about Xavier Story just because that's one of the veterans we haven't heard a lot about. He mentioned he's been, coming in with the ones, so very interested to see what Xavier does at G-Day. A former 5-star who's part of a loaded room there. Talked up Branson Robinson, who I think is a guy that has big opportunity with Kendall Milton unavailable. You had Dejon Edwards dealing with injury, and Andrew Paul still working his way back from an ACL. I wanted to get your thoughts on this, Kip, something I thought was really interesting. Kirby was asked about the personality of this offense and sort of figuring that out. And Kirby made the point to say, we're worried more about players, not plays during spring. We want to figure out the guys who can make these plays, the guys that can block for the players who will make these plays. What did you make of that sort of mindset of really focusing more on the spring, at looking at personnel, at figuring out who sort of stands out, and then getting ready to go from there once spring's over with?
You don't even know who your quarterback's going to be. And so I think you look at Georgia just in 2020 when they, didn't really have an established identity at quarterback. They also didn't really have an established identity on the offense. And then, 2021, again, Stetson Bennett coming in, JT Daniels getting hurt. It was kind of a tale of two offenses there as well. Last year, you knew exactly what Georgia was bringing to the table. You had an established quarterback, and you knew who your playmakers were going to be. You returned Brock Bowers. You thought you had a number 1 in A.D. Mitchell. You knew what you had in Darnell Washington, and you saw what Lad McConkey could do. You also, knew who your blockers are going to be. So, in effect, sure. I think, Georgia's got a deep room of skill position players, if everyone's healthy. But at the same time, you don't know exactly what you have at running back right now because you got some guys banged up. You don't know who your quarterback's going to be. You also still have a battle at left tackle. So I think right now he's right. You have to still look and see what that identity is going to be. What I think, you're not going to get the same blocking at the tight end position that you had from Darnell Washington. I think, Oscar Delp and Lawson Lucky will go a long way in showing just how much of that identity will still be like that. But I would imagine that the tight end position will be catching a lot more balls this season than last year. I mean, that goes without saying, even with, the return of Brock Bowers again for what will probably be his last season playing for Georgia. I think that until you know what you have at quarterback, you cannot really establish the identity of the offense because, like you said, you have to build it around the guys you have. And I think right now, what these guys do on third down is very different between a Carson Beck, a Brock Vandegrift, and even a Gunnar Stockton. I think, and that's really where you establish your identity is, last year, Stetson Bennett, he was as clutch as it got on third down. And that's when they're the greatest pressure on your quarterback, third down. He had the ability to extend plays, but he also just, had that innate ability to make big plays when he needed to. And so, whether or not you're doing play action or handoff on early downs, it's really that third down where you figure out who you're going to be as a team. And I think it all starts at quarterback. And that could be something where they don't know the identity of this team until late in the summer, fall camp. But that's just where it sets up right now. No one's separated themselves at the quarterback position, and they all have different skill sets. Whoever wins that job, you can start to build around that. So there are some things we know. I think Georgia's going to have an elite set group of pass catchers. Still have to figure out what they have at running back and get these guys healthy. So I don't think you figure out the identity of this team until, maybe late July, early August.
One more note from Saturday that I thought was really interesting was Kirby pointing out that these receivers, the new guys, are, and his quote was, quote, trying to learn a new language. And he talked about 2 transfers in, Ra Thomas, Dominic Lovett, 3 high school signees, Tyler Williams, Anthony Evans, Yazid Haynes. He said that these guys are still kind of learning what it takes and knowing the ins and outs, because he talked about one of the things that he was disappointed in the second scrimmage that was held on Thursday was some of the administrative things, getting lined up correctly, not having 2 guys in motion at the same time, false starts. And part of that goes with those receivers learning the ropes because, based on everything we've heard, a guy like Ra Thomas kind of started slow because, he was in a whole new situation. This offense and what is expected and asked of the receivers is very, very different compared to, say, Mississippi State, where Ra was. But it seems like, that has kind of clicked for him, and as a result, he's been able to make plays. So I'm interested to see when we get to G-Day just how those receivers play, particularly those new guys and those younger guys, because they are asked to know a lot and learn a lot, and it certainly doesn't happen overnight.
Yeah, think about that too deep right now, though. And then that's if you want to look for a potential identity, a group that can really, really go out there and spread the ball around. I know that, fans still want to see that, another 1,000-yard receiver, but you have Lab McConkey and Dylan Bell. You got Dominic Lovett and Arian Smith, and then Ra Thomas and Marcus Rosemy-Jacksaint. That's a pretty legit 2 deep right there. So you mentioned those young guys. If you see any of those guys, in the rotation this fall, it'll be because they earned it. That is a talented and experienced group. So I think, again, if I'm looking for an early identity, I think this is going to be a team that is not afraid to air it out because they have a elite group of pass catchers. I already talked about the tight ends. That's an outstanding group right there for whoever's at quarterback for Georgia.
So we'll have one more podcast before G-Day, but before we get to that podcast, which we plan on that being a mailbag for you guys, Kip, what are you most interested in when it comes to G-Day? What are the things that interest you that you really feel like you're going to focus on once we get to Sanford Stadium on Saturday and have a chance to watch these guys duke it out?
Well, the fact that they're not going to be able to, take these quarterbacks down is going to affect what I'd like to learn about which is, I mean, I think Kirby Smart talked about it, which is the havoc rate. How are you going to affect opposing quarterbacks? And I know that, Georgia last season, they didn't do that at a high level. I mean, Kirby, if you brought that up to Kirby, he would obviously, the contrarian that he is, fight you on that and say the opposite and say they, did an outstanding job. But the numbers still say otherwise. And so while they still had an elite defense, just getting to the quarterback, affecting the quarterback is still something that is one of the most pivotal parts of, creating those explosives plays that Georgia wants on defense, and to avoid allowing explosives. So, it's still something I want to see the young pass rusher group. I know, again, we're not going to have any issues writing about quarterbacks. Whatever they do, we will be breaking down, every week for the next couple of months. But still want to see how these young guys do, how they look. And at the same time, whether they're going against an Austin Blasky and Amaris Mims, or an Ernest Green, how they do on a snap-to-snap basis, because regardless, these guys are going to play huge roles this year. Even when Marvin Jones Jr. comes back, Mykel Williams is healthy. These guys, they're going to be asking a lot from freshmen at that position this year. I want to see how consistent they can do on a snap-to-snap basis. And again, also, can they set the edge? Because one thing that, Nolan Smith and Robert Bale brought to the table, they had no problems there setting the edge. And I think that's a huge part of the position, regardless of whether they have a Sam or a Jack on the field. They're asking their guys to, play the run and the pass. So just want to see what they have at that position group, because I think that this defense has a chance to be really, really fast this season. One of the most explosive defenses in the country, but at the same time, a very young defense. So I want to see how they're progressing there, and if they've grown up since they got on campus.
I think for me, other than the position battles that we've talked about, over and over again, running back, I want to see how the two Robinsons, Branson and Roderick, how they play, and we'll see too how much work they get. And then on the defensive side, I think outside linebacker, just because they're so young, they're so inexperienced, just how do they hold up, and how do some of those younger guys like Damon Wilson, Sam Mpemba, Gabriel Harris, how do they show up in Sanford Stadium? Well, we'll get ready to wrap this episode up. Quick Georgia men's basketball minute. Kind of had a blast from the past with Severe Wheeler, who started his career at Georgia, transferred to Kentucky. He visited Georgia over the weekend, waiting to check in to see how that went. Based on everything I've heard, it seems like if Georgia winds up not being a factor, to watch Kansas State as he decides where he's going to go next. But we're going to keep an eye out with basketball, and hoping for later in the week to check in and see who is going to visit as part of G-Day. I expect that to happen. That's what Mike White and company did last year, and wound up signing a few of those guys who were on campus to check out Athens in time for the spring game. So on that note, we're going to wrap this up. Like I mentioned earlier, hoping to do another podcast on Friday, probably around noon, but we may wind up editing that time depending on what's going on. But we'll do a mailbag, answer your guys' questions as we get ready for G-Day, and continue the countdown. We'll be back in Sanford Stadium before you know it, and we'll have all kinds of content coming out of the spring game. So we're going to wrap up this episode right there. Thanks to Kip. Thanks for everybody who popped on and was listening live, checking out this after the fact. But we're going to finish it up right there. Appreciate everybody who checked this out. And until next time, take care.